if we understand early development and we understand what our children did not get, we understand how to create a safe environment that will provide nurture and healing so that our children can come back online. So recovering function is going to be contingent on us understanding these things. Now, what you need to know is that there are 6 primary risk factors. And those risk factors are a difficult pregnancy, a difficult birth, early hospitalization, abuse, neglect, and trauma. If a child has any of those risk factors, they are going to come to us with complex developmental issues that we need to understand how to heal. We have babies who are born cranky and fussy with gastric distress because their mother's neurochemistry was fraught with anxiety. She didn't know if she would abort or if she would give the child up. She was fighting with her father about whether or not she could keep the baby. She might have been fighting with a boyfriend about what would happen to this child. If a child comes to you at birth, they've already been traumatized. They've got changes in their gastric system. They've got changes in their brain development. They've got changes in their brain chemistry. There's plenty of research that documents that. So I have to understand that if a child comes to me, it's not just the child locked in the closet for 3 years, but the child who's traumatized prenatally is going to have global changes. Now, one of the most profound elements of our work is the fact that we want to look at the whole child. So we're going to look at the body, what has happened to the body. For example, insulin receptor sites are changed in a child who's come from a hard place. That means they're very subject to blood sugar shifts. If there was malnutrition in utero or postnatally, they're going to be subject to blood sugar shifts. We feed them something every 2 hours, something nutritious every 2 hours. They're going to be subject to dehydration because the brain chemical glutamate that should have had to do with neurogenesis and the development of the brain in optimal environments, that thing has become not a fire in the hearth, but a spark in the forest. So that is a runaway flame, and the more dehydrated your child is, the more glutamate will fire and the more aberrant behavior you're going to have. So we need to look at what happened to the body, what happened to the digestion, what happened to the little tummy problems. When we talk to parents, one of the first things we said is, how is your child's eating in the original, when they first came home to you? How was their digestion? How were they about being cranky? How were their poos? That's a very scientific question to ask. People respect your PhD a lot when you ask about their baby's poos. But we know that these things give us significant clues about what our children need. So we're going to look at the body, and then we're going to look at, we call those empowering principles. We know that a child who didn't get safe nurture and safe love and safe touch has brain systems that didn't develop optimally. Hubel and Wiesel in 1981 received a Nobel Prize for science. They took young kittens, newborn kittens, and they sutured the eyes closed. They didn't let the kitten's eyes open naturally at 10 days, but rather they let them remain sutured for about 2 months. When they unsutured the eyes, they documented the fact that the kittens were functionally blind, although the optical system and the brain systems were intact because they were contingent on being used. So we've got children who come to us who don't understand sensory data coming in. If they don't understand sensory data coming in, all they can do is fight, flight, or freeze. So empowering principles for us are things like food, water, sensory activities every 2 hours. Those are empowering things. You have got to create that in your environment if you want to have a safe environment. We have connecting principles. That is the human being. Matter of fact, some of the most notable scientists of our era completed a document about 2 years ago called Hardwired to Connect. And the goal of these 30 scientists, who are among the most notable names of science and medicine of our era, was to look at the problem of children's mental health and come up with answers. And what one of their greatest premises was, we have to look at the whole child. And we have to embed that child in an authoritative community where you have schools that understand your child's needs. You have a Sunday school class. You have a piano teacher, you have the coach, you have mom and dad. And so we know one of the things that they called their document, their report, hardwired to connect, because we know that babies come to us primed to make connection with us. Now, if that need is rebuffed, the more tender-hearted the child and the more desperately they want to connect, the more aggressive and violent they will be. If I desperately want to be connected to you and you do not know how to connect to me, as an abusive parent before these children come to us, or a neglectful parent before these children come to us, then my systems, fight, flight, or freeze, take over. In the beginning, the caregiver should manage fear. My child's afraid, I comfort them. My child is lonely, I hold them. My child is cold, I warm them. My child is hungry, I feed them. I'm an external modem for at least the first 3 years of life. We know that the part of the brain that has to do with fight, flight, or freeze, the amygdala, is active online in utero. So you can have a child who's anxious or depressed or who's prone to aggression when they're 3 days old. There's documentation of that. Those children are also designed when they're born. They want to study the human face. They want to connect more than they want anything. And so our goal is to help them connect to us. But now we've got a child who's learned to protect themselves because there wasn't an external hard drive to deal with their world. Now, the region of the brain that's called the hippocampus that does your reasoned decisions, good choices, actually takes 3 decades to mature. I'd like to report to you my hippocampus is fully mature. But what you need to know is that it takes 3 years of mentoring to really come online. And I'm going to show you the kind of mentoring that I'm talking about. So if you have a child who didn't get optimal care in the first 3 years of their life, if they were in an institution, if they were hospitalized for several months because of prematurity, if they were neglected by a depressed or abusive parent, or if they were actually harmed, they need empowering, and they have to have connecting that's insightful and that can lead them into what they need to be.